It's warm.
Huh.
I added some bread too.
You didn't have to, miss.
I wanted to. It's raining out here. You'll get sick sitting like this. Come with me.
Miss Alara, he left clear instructions. You're now a shareholder in the company.
This can't be real.
Waitress gave her lunch to a homeless man. The next day, her name was on the billionaire's will. Have you ever met someone whose kindness seemed too quiet to notice until it changed everything? Alara Brooks was one of those people. 25, with soft brown hair always pulled into a messy bun, and a habit of apologizing even when she hadn't done anything wrong. She worked at a small diner on the corner of Pine and 3rd, a place that smelled of coffee, rain, and the faint sweetness of syrup that never really left the air. The sign above the door read, "Sonny's Place," though there wasn't much sunshine that morning. Clouds hung low over the city, and the steady drizzle turned the streets into mirrors of silver and gray. Inside, the diner glowed with yellow light, cracked red booths, a humming refrigerator, and the gentle hiss of bacon frying behind the counter. Alara moved between tables with practiced rhythm, balancing 2 plates in one hand and a coffee pot in the other. "Refill, Mr. Haynes?" she asked, her voice gentle but clear. The older man at booth 3 smiled and nodded. "You take better care of me than my own daughter," he said with a chuckle. Alara smiled, pouring carefully. "That's because I charge extra for kindness." He laughed, and she moved on. It was small talk, the kind that filled the long hours of her morning shift. But beneath the laughter was the quiet exhaustion of someone who hadn't had a real day off in months. Rent, bills, student loans, all of it pressed on her shoulders, though she never let it show. Carl, the cook, leaned out from the kitchen window, wiping his hands on his apron. "Hey kid, you eat yet?" Alara shook her head. "Not yet. I'll grab something on my break. Make sure you do. You're fading away," he said with mock sternness before disappearing back into the kitchen. When noon came, the diner slowed. Rain tapped softly against the windows, and the crowd thinned until only the sound of silverware and low music filled the space. Alara finally untied her apron and sat at the counter with her small lunch, a grilled cheese and a cup of tomato soup. She took one bite, then glanced out the window. Across the street, near the bus stop, a man sat hunched under the awning. His coat was soaked, and his hands trembled as he cupped them for warmth. A small cardboard sign rested beside him, the ink smudged by rain. She couldn't read the words, but she didn't need to. For a moment, she just watched. People passed by without looking, heads down, umbrellas up, eyes fixed on their own worries. Alara sighed quietly. She picked up her sandwich, looked at it for a second, then reached for a takeout box. Carl looked up when she began packing the food. "You heading out?" "Just for a minute," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "In this rain?" "I'll be quick." Alara stepped out into the drizzle, holding the box under her jacket. The air was cold and smelled like wet pavement and car exhaust. Her sneakers splashed through shallow puddles as she crossed the street. When she reached the man, she knelt beside him, close enough to see that he wasn't as old as she first thought, maybe late 50s, with graying hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed both tired and alert. "Hi," she said softly. "You okay out here?" The man looked up slowly. "I'll be fine, miss. Just a bad day." Alara held out the box. "I brought you something warm. It's just soup and a sandwich, but it's fresh." He hesitated, his hand shaking slightly. "You don't have to do that." "I know," she said, smiling. "That's why I'm doing it." He blinked, then gave a quiet, disbelieving laugh. "People don't usually stop." Maybe they should. For a moment, neither spoke. Rain dripped from the edge of the awning, and a bus hissed as it passed by, spraying mist across the sidewalk. Alara stood, brushing water from her sleeves. "My name's Alara," she said. "You take care of yourself, okay?" The man looked up at her again, studying her face like he was memorizing it. "Alara," he repeated softly. "That's a rare name. Means something, doesn't it?" She shrugged lightly. "My mom said it means light. I guess she hoped I'd be one." He nodded slowly. She was right. Alara smiled, embarrassed. "Well, you try to stay dry, Mr. "Call me James," he said, his voice quiet. "And thank you, Miss Brooks." She froze slightly. "I didn't tell you my last name," he smiled faintly. "It's stitched on your name tag." "Oh," she said, letting out a nervous laugh. Right. When she turned to go, he added softly, You remind me of someone I used to know. Ilara glanced back, but he didn't explain. His eyes had gone distant, lost in memory. She hesitated, then waved. Goodbye, James. Back inside the diner, Carl gave her a mock glare. You're gonna catch pneumonia running around in the rain like that. He looked hungry, she said simply, sitting down again. Carl sighed. You've got a good heart, kid. Just don't let it get you hurt. Ilara smiled faintly, staring out the fogged window. The man was still there, eating slowly, the steam from his coffee rising like a small candle flame against the cold. When her shift ended that evening, the streets were already dark. She wrapped her scarf around her neck and stepped outside. The man was gone. Only a folded piece of cardboard lay where he'd been sitting. She bent to pick it up. The ink had run, but she could still make out the words. Don't stop being kind. She stood there in the rain, holding that small, ruined sign, feeling something strange she couldn't explain, a heaviness and warmth mixed together. That night, as she counted her tips on her small kitchen table, she thought about him, the way he'd said her name, the way his eyes seemed to hold something deeper, almost familiar. Then she shook her head, folded the few crumpled bills she'd made, and told herself to stop thinking about it. The next morning began with a pale slice of sunlight pushing through Ilara's thin curtains. The city outside hummed awake, distant car horns, footsteps on wet pavement, the sound of a neighbor's radio leaking through the walls. She stretched slowly, rubbing her eyes. Another day, another shift. She moved through her small apartment, the one-room kind with peeling paint and a stubborn heater that only worked when it wanted to. Her uniform hung on the back of a chair, still faintly smelling of coffee and soap. She tied her hair, buttoned her shirt, and looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment. There were circles under her eyes, but her smile was steady. Downstairs, the street still glistened from last night's rain. The diner's neon sign buzzed faintly as she unlocked the back door and stepped inside. The smell of fresh coffee greeted her. Carl was already there, whistling off key as he cracked eggs into a pan. Morning, sunshine, he said. You're early? Couldn't sleep, she said, setting her bag down. You and me both. This city never shuts up. Ilara smiled faintly, pulling on her apron. The bell over the front door jingled as the first few regulars wandered in. Mr. Haynes, the postman, and a couple of construction workers grabbing breakfast before their shift. Everything felt normal. Ordinary. Just how she liked it. But around 9:30, as she wiped down a table near the window, a dark sedan pulled up outside. It didn't look like it belonged there, polished, sleek, and far too new for this part of town. The engine idled for a moment before shutting off. A man stepped out, tall, wearing a long coat and a black suit that didn't fit the diner's world at all. He paused under the awning, scanned the street, then pushed through the door. The bell jingled softly. The man's shoes clicked against the tiled floor as his eyes moved through the small room, stopping briefly on Ilara. She gave him a polite nod. Good morning, coffee? He smiled slightly. Please. His voice was calm, low, professional. She poured him a cup, setting it down on the counter. You new around here? She asked lightly. Just passing through, he said. Then, after a moment, You must be Ilara Brooks. Her hand paused mid-wipe. Yeah, that's me. He extended a small white card across the counter. My name is Daniel Cole. I work with the legal firm of Hanley and Pierce. Carl looked up from the kitchen window, frowning. She didn't do anything, did she? Daniel smiled. No, sir. Nothing like that. He turned back to Ilara. Miss Brooks, I was hoping to speak with you privately, if you have a minute. Ilara blinked, confused. About what? I'll explain, he said gently. It'll only take a moment. She hesitated, glancing at Carl. He shrugged. Go on, I'll cover. Ilara led Daniel to a small booth in the corner. He slid a folder onto the table, opening it neatly. Inside were a few sheets of paper, some typed, some handwritten. His movements were calm, practiced. Miss Brooks, he began, did you by chance speak to or assist a man yesterday near this diner? Older, gray hair, possibly homeless? Ilara frowned, trying to read his tone. Yes. His name was James. He was sitting by the bus stop. Daniel nodded slowly. And you gave him food? Just my lunch, she said. Why? He took a quiet breath, his eyes softening. Miss Brooks, the man you met was James Whitmore. She blinked, searching her memory. The name meant nothing. Who is that? James Whitmore, Daniel said carefully, was the founder and majority shareholder of Whitmore Industries. He passed away late last night. Alara stared at him, the words sinking in slowly. You're saying? The man I gave lunch to was a billionaire? Yes, Daniel said softly, though very few knew what he looked like in his later years. He'd been living away from the public eye for almost a decade. Her mind raced. The rain, his coat, the way he'd said her name. I didn't know, she said quietly. He didn't tell me anything, Daniel nodded. He wouldn't have. Mr. Whitmore was known for testing people's hearts. He believed character revealed itself in small moments, not grand ones. Alara sat back, speechless. The diner noise faded around her. The clink of forks, the hum of conversation, all distant now. Daniel continued, his tone calm but gentle. Mr. Whitmore left specific instructions in his final will. Our firm received them this morning. Your name, Miss Brooks, was written in his own handwriting. My name? She whispered. He nodded. Yes. You might want to sit down properly for this next part. I am sitting, she murmured. Daniel gave a faint smile. Then brace yourself anyway. Mr. Whitmore left you a portion of his estate. Alara blinked, certain she'd misheard. What? He named you as one of his beneficiaries. She let out a small, stunned laugh. That's not possible. He didn't even know me. Daniel met her eyes steadily. He knew enough. Apparently, he wrote a note explaining his decision. I have a copy if you'd like to read it. Her hands trembled slightly as he unfolded a single page. The handwriting was neat but shaky. She recognized it instantly, the way the letters looped, the faint smudge of ink. It was his. To Alara Brooks, you stopped when others walked by. You gave when you had little to spare. The world needs more hearts like yours. Use this gift as you choose, but never lose that kindness. It's rarer than gold. James Whitmore. Alara's breath caught. She read it again, then again, until the words blurred. This has to be a mistake, she whispered. Daniel shook his head. I'm afraid not. It's legally binding. You've been named in the will. We'll need you at our office tomorrow morning to finalize the documents. Carl appeared at the counter, pretending not to eavesdrop but failing miserably. Everything okay over there? Alara turned toward him slowly. He says the man I gave lunch to yesterday was James Whitmore. The James Whitmore? Carl's mouth dropped open. The tech guy? The billionaire? Daniel nodded. That's correct. Carl whistled under his breath. Kid, you sure know how to pick who you share a sandwich with. Alara managed a weak laugh, though her hands were still shaking. I don't understand, she said quietly to Daniel. Why me? There must be hundreds of people who deserve something like this more. Daniel smiled faintly. Mr. Whitmore believed in moments of truth. I think he saw one in you. For the rest of the day, Alara moved through her shift in a daze. The world felt slightly off balance, like she was walking through a dream she couldn't wake from. Every plate she carried, every order she wrote down, it all felt strangely distant. Customers talked, laughed, asked for refills, and she smiled automatically. But her mind kept drifting back to the rain, the bus stop, the quiet gratitude in James's eyes. When her shift ended, Daniel was gone. But the white card remained on the counter, his firm's name printed in clean letters. She slipped it into her pocket and walked home in silence. That night, the city seemed different. The streetlights glowed softer, the hum of traffic slower, as if the world itself was catching its breath. She sat on her bed with the letter in her hands, reading it under the warm light of her bedside lamp. It wasn't the money that made her cry. It was the thought that someone had noticed her, really seen her, in a world where she'd spent years feeling invisible. The next morning would bring more than she was ready for. Reporters, questions, and a truth about James Whitmore that no one saw coming. The morning sun slipped in slowly through the slats of Alara's blinds, spilling warm light across her small apartment. It felt heavier than usual, as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. Alara sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floorboards, her hands wrapped around Daniel Cole's card. She had barely slept, not out of anxiety, but out of a strange mixture of disbelief and anticipation. Every little sound outside, the hum of a distant car, the chirp of a morning bird, even the clatter of a trash can lid in the alley, seemed louder than normal, sharper, as though the city itself was alert. Her mind replayed the events of the previous day, the rain, the man she had given her lunch to, the words etched in ink that had made her heart pound. She had always thought she was invisible, like most of her days had passed unnoticed. And yet here she was, poised on the brink of something she had never imagined. By 7:30, she dressed carefully, straightening her apron in the mirror, trying to quiet the flutter of nerves in her stomach. She gave herself a small pep talk. "You're just going to meet some people," she whispered to herself. "They'll explain it. You'll understand. Nothing's changed, except everything." The streets were dry now, sparkling slightly from the rain the day before. The city smelled faintly of baked bread and wet asphalt, a comforting combination that always reminded her of mornings at the diner. She walked briskly to the sleek black sedan waiting at the curb, Daniel Cole already at the wheel. "Good morning," he said, his calm voice anchoring her spinning thoughts. "Shall we?" Ilara nodded, sliding into the passenger seat. The leather smelled faintly of vanilla and polish, foreign and luxurious. As they drove, the city blurred past her window. She noticed small details she'd never paid attention to before, the way the sunlight caught in puddles along the curb, a street musician tapping a rhythm on his worn guitar, a mother holding a baby as they crossed the street. Everything seemed suddenly alive, full of potential meaning, as if the universe had shifted and she was finally noticing. The office was a towering glass building, intimidating in its height and quiet perfection. Inside, the cool air smelled faintly of paper and antiseptic. Polished floors reflected every step she took, and the elevator ride seemed longer than it should have, giving her time to imagine every possibility. What if this was all a mistake? What if she had been misidentified? She shook her head, trying to dispel the creeping fear. Daniel led her down a long corridor and into a large conference room. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric patterns on the mahogany table. A group of 5 people sat waiting, lawyers in neat suits, their expressions polite but reserved, and one elderly man whose eyes followed her with quiet intensity. He didn't stand immediately. Instead, he waited for her to settle in, as if judging whether she belonged there. "This is Mr. Whitmore's executor," Daniel explained softly. "He will oversee the reading of the will. You'll have a chance to review the documents privately first." Ilara's hands felt clammy as she took the folder offered to her. The weight of it surprised her. Not heavy, but somehow significant, as if it contained more than papers. She opened it slowly, and her eyes fell on a smaller envelope tucked inside. Carefully, she unfolded it. The letter inside was in the unmistakable handwriting of James Whitmore, neat but slightly shaky. Every curve of every letter seemed to carry weight, and the faint smudge of ink along the edges made it feel tangible, intimate. She began to read, "Ilara, you will never know how many people pass through their days without noticing those who struggle. You saw James, you acted, you gave without expectation. That alone shows a heart most people lose by the time they reach 25. I leave you this inheritance not because of what you can do with it, but because I believe in what you already are. Keep your heart. Let it guide you even when the world pressures you to close it off." Ilara's chest tightened. She read the words again, then again. Each repetition made her stomach lurch, made her heart ache in a new way. She thought of the rain, of James sitting on that curb, of the quiet gratitude in his eyes. She hadn't realized the impact of such a small gesture. Not only had it been seen, it had been immortalized. The executor cleared his throat gently, pulling her back to the room. "Miss Brooks, the official part of the will outlines the estate and your inheritance. We will go through it carefully, step by step. Please take your time." She nodded, her fingers trembling as she held the letter. She was trying to digest what it meant. Money had never been the focus of her life. She had scraped by, saved carefully, and dreamed quietly, but this was beyond comprehension. She felt a surge of gratitude and fear all at once. As they went through the details, she found herself asking questions she never expected to ask. How much of the estate she was entitled to, what responsibilities came with it, what steps she needed to take. Every answer brought a mix of relief and disbelief. This was her life now, yet it didn't feel real. Hours passed in a blur. The legal process stretched into the afternoon, but her mind wandered elsewhere, to James, to that moment in the rain, to the feeling of connection she hadn't experienced in years. Daniel watched her quietly, sensing the storm of emotions inside her. Finally, he suggested a break. "Step outside for a moment," he said. "Get some air. Let the weight of this settle a bit." Ilara walked slowly into the sunlight outside the building. The city was alive, bustling as usual, but she noticed things she hadn't before. Children laughing on the corner, a street artist painting with bold strokes, an elderly couple holding hands across the street. Everything felt sharper, more vibrant, more meaningful, and then she saw him. James Whitmore, not the homeless man from yesterday, but the living, breathing figure she recognized instantly. Dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his presence commanding yet gentle. He stepped from the shade of the building across the street, watching her. For a heartbeat she couldn't breathe. "Hello, Ilara," he said softly. His voice carried warmth, reassurance, and a quiet authority that seemed to still the air around them. I don't understand," she whispered. You're alive?" He smiled faintly. "I am. I wanted to see you once more, to tell you what you need to hear in person." Her heart raced. She felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know what to say. You don't even know me. Why me?" "You gave without expectation," he said simply. "You saw someone who needed a hand and you acted. That is the truest measure of a person's heart. That is why I chose you." Ilara's voice trembled. "I've never been seen like that before." "Not really. Not in a way that matters." "You have been seen," James said gently. "By me, by those who understand that kindness is rarer than wealth. You embody it naturally, without thought, without calculation. That is why you deserve what comes next." She blinked, struggling to hold herself together. The city moved around them, oblivious, but she felt a quiet bubble of stillness, as if the world had paused to witness her awakening. I don't know if I deserve this," she admitted. "I barely manage as it is." "You do," he said softly. "Money is secondary. What matters is that someone noticed your heart. That recognition is more valuable than anything else in the world." They stood in silence for a long moment, the city buzzing quietly around them, and Ilara felt something shift inside her, a mix of awe, humility, and hope. She realized she had spent years believing small gestures meant nothing, that her life would remain invisible. And yet, here she was, alive in someone's eyes in a way that would echo forever. She thought of the rain, of the warmth of the food she had offered, of the simple smile she had given, and she understood finally that the smallest acts carried the greatest weight. Tears spilled freely as she smiled, her first real, unguarded smile in a long time. She felt lighter, freer, ready to accept the world as it came. Not because she had money or status, but because she had been seen. Truly seen. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For everything." James nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. "Keep your heart, Ilara. That is your greatest gift. Let it guide you always." She watched him walk away, his figure dissolving into the bustle of the city, leaving her with a heart full of gratitude and a life forever changed. Back in her apartment that evening, Ilara sat by the window with the letter on her lap, staring at the city lights twinkling below. She thought of all the small choices, the small acts of kindness she had performed without expectation, and she realized that each one had mattered. Each one had created ripples she could never have imagined. The world was vast and chaotic, but she no longer felt lost. She felt ready to live, ready to give, ready to continue the quiet ripple of kindness that had brought her here. And in that moment, Ilara Brooks, once just another unnoticed face in the crowd, understood something beautiful. Her life had been rewritten, not by fortune, but by a heart that noticed what others ignored. The city continued on, unaware, but she smiled, knowing the truth. One small act of kindness could indeed change everything. And that was the incredible story of Ilara Brooks, a simple act of kindness that changed her life forever. Hit like if this story inspired you, and share it with someone who needs hope. Comment below where you're watching from. I'd love to see. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more amazing stories.